been about 4 years now since Solid State Logic released the original SSL2 and SSL2 Plus models, and they quickly became one of the best-selling budget audio interfaces on the market. Fast forward to today, and we now have the newest iterations, the SSL2 and SSL2 Plus Mark II models, and there's one big reason why, even if you own the original, you may want to upgrade. Let's talk about it. Both models are USB 2.0, with the base model retailing at $229, while the Plus model retails at $299 at the time of this video. And while the original models kept all the connectivity on the back, we now have two high-Z instrument inputs and two headphone outputs on the front. Those instrument inputs have a dynamic range of 116 dBA weighted, while the high current headphone outputs have 119.5 dB of dynamic range, and thanks to the NJM headphone amps, they sound fantastic. Now, I've used several competitor interfaces over the last year, and often find I have to drive the volume knob almost all the way up to get a nice loud volume in my ATH M50Xs, but with these headphone outputs, I can only crank the volume knob to about 50%, maybe 55% to achieve that same level of loudness. They've done a great job here and claim they can drive any pair of headphones, and while I don't own more sets, I'd love to hear your feedback if you've got a different set of cans and how they worked for you. Moving on to the back of the units, you'll find pretty much the same connectivity when it comes to the base models compared to the original, with both having a pair of mic line inputs and a set of balanced outputs. With the Plus models, you'll now notice the RCA outputs are gone in favor of 4 balanced outputs. Let's focus on the SSL2 Plus Mark II model, and we once again have two bus-powered analog mic line preamps with 116.5 dB dynamic range and a max gain of 64 dB. Like the previous models, they feature a legacy 4K analog enhancement option, which adds color inspired by 4000 consoles and adds harmonic distortion and a high-frequency boost to give whatever you're recording a little flavor. You've then got 4 professional-grade DC-coupled balanced line outputs with 120 dB dynamic range, so you can run multiple sets of monitors and MIDI in and out for you producers and creators who still use MIDI. That brings us to the top of the interface, where you'll access all of the controls. Starting from the left, we've got your channel 1 and 2 input sections. Each section has 3 buttons on top: a 48-volt phantom power button to power your condenser microphones, a line button to use a line-in device like keyboards or synthesizers, and a high-pass filter to cut out low frequencies. Then we've got your LED meter to monitor your input signal, and a gain knob so you can set your gain properly. Now, one of the newer trends I've seen with recent audio interface releases that I don't see here is auto gain, and if the lack of it is a concern to you, just make sure your input signal in your software is at -10 or -12 dB and you'll be just fine. Honestly, auto gain isn't perfect anyway. I've had to further adjust even after setting it on some devices. And at the bottom of each section is your legacy 4K button to add some color. On the right side of the interface is your monitoring section, and we start off with a USB LED icon in the middle, followed by a big knob under that to control your monitor volume. Now, much like the headphone outputs, where I had to really crank the volume on other interfaces to get a good loud signal, but only had to go about halfway on the SSL2 Plus Mark II, the big knob here is substantially better in terms of perceivable loudness compared to other similar interfaces. With the last desktop interface I've been using, I had to raise the big knob about 80 to 85% to get a nice loud volume in my room, while the SSL puts out a much stronger signal, and out of the 11 settings on the gain knob, I found 3 to be just as loud as that same 80%, and honestly, I can't even hit 4 without feeling like one of the neighbors is going to complain. Whether or not this interface makes audio sound any better is debatable, but I'd much rather barely have to crank up the big knob to get a good signal instead of almost maxing it out. Finally, we have a row of knobs on the right. Starting at the top is your monitor mix control knob, where if you turn it all the way to the left or input side, you'll only hear your inputs, while turning it to the right or USB side will play back your computer audio. There's a stereo button next to that you'll want to engage if you're recording in stereo so you can hear the stereo image in the headphones, and then your 2 headphone volume knobs under that. Headphones B has a 3 and 4 button, which you'll want to use if you want to create an independent mix. Now that's the rundown on the physical features of the interface, and compared to the original, I do prefer the new brushed metal finish with that inner black square. It just looks sleek on my desk. And with one of the biggest changes, the new 32-bit 192 kHz converters, audio should be clearer and more detailed than before, and while the difference may not be audible to the average person, recording is a game of inches. You add a preamp for a little bit of improvement, a compressor for a little bit of improvement, so why not? 32-bit means more dynamic range for just a little bit more improvement. You've also got loopback for you streamers out there, and one of the most generous software packages I've ever seen. You get the SSL production pack, which includes Vocal Strip 2 and Drum Strip, a 3-month trial to complete access by Slate Digital, the Mixbus 10 DAW, SonarWorks Sound ID reference, Arcade by Output, Antares Autotune Unlimited, Native Instruments hybrid keys and complete, and more. Now that's pretty significant if you're just getting started, and I'd have no problem recommending it if that's the case. If you're a bit seasoned and wondering if it's worth the upgrade, well, let's start off by doing a latency test on my Windows PC. It's worth noting SSL has its own USB ASIO WDM driver, while it uses Core Audio on Mac. And now for preamp noise, and while this isn't the most scientific way of measuring, it's what I have, and so I'll max out the gain with my SM7B connected, which will be a lot more helpful in my upcoming videos where I'll compare noise from different interfaces to paint a better picture, so stay tuned for that. And finally, in case you're not familiar with what the 4K legacy color sounds like, here's some examples with it on and off. True story, I recently went through a crazy experience where we were all getting really sick, with me getting the worst of it to the point I was admitted to the ER 4 separate times. I literally felt like I was dying. We finally figured out we had black mold in our master bathroom, and because I work from home doing YouTube, I got the worst of it. It ended up being a total loss of property down to the clothes on our backs as the spores and toxins spread throughout the entire apartment, so it's been a rough and very costly experience replacing everything, not to mention the neurological issues I now suffer from. I can only hope fade with time. So yes, I'm going to use this test to ask that if you found this video helpful and you decide to buy one of these units, you consider using my link in the description, which helps me earn a small percentage so we can continue to try to get back on our feet. So, should you upgrade from the original? Absolutely, without a doubt, yes. Now, besides the bump up in converter quality, the single most important reason you should upgrade is that unlike the first version, you can now bypass the built-in preamps by clicking the line button, so you can run external gear like preamps and compressors without coloring the sound. And that's a huge feature and honestly should be standard by now, but a lot of interfaces out there still don't allow you to, so if you ever plan to expand your gear, the Mark II has you covered. And if you're looking for your first audio interface, this is a fantastic option, but if you're still on the fence, stay tuned as I'll have some really useful content coming your way. Now that's the 411 on the new SSL2 and SSL2 Plus Mark II models. Let me know in the comments what you think of the update, and before you ask me should you buy it over another interface, hit that subscribe button and notification bell to stay tuned as I'll have plenty of audio interface content coming your way. Now that's going to wrap things up for today. I'll see you next time.